We don't have, the way we do our collection, we don't, we don't get that particular breakout for collection relative to those costs, that cost effectiveness. Because of it, it's all in one act, more or less, with the janitorial team making their rounds. So we don't see that. Where we see, what we hope to be in going forward with our recycling enhancement is to, we see our cost, we look at lowering those costs for what goes in the landfill now with the current recycle program. That is the big target we're looking at.
Because it's avoided costs that's what you're really after.
This is probably not a bad time to talk about the composition of what's in the street side litter cans. Do you guys want to take just a couple minutes and?
I could give a brief overview. And
Yeah.
Jump in if you like. I think that the messages to take home are that regardless of the type of litter can that we looked at, between 40 and 50% of the material that went into litter cans was potentially recyclable, although the largest chunk of that was paper, and we've already discussed that here. But sort of consistently across parks and street side and the nightlife areas in Pioneer Square, glass has been the biggest recyclable thing in the waste, ranging between 12 and 14%, but pretty consistently. And plastic and metal combined kind of hover around about 6 to 7%. And then the rest is potentially recyclable paper, up to about 40 to 50% of the waste stream there. I think that's the overview. The numbers are kind of remarkably consistent across the different sectors that we examined.
Though I think the parks numbers do show, isn't it, the regional parks, 34% of the material is recyclable?
Regional parks were a bit lower, yeah.
And then the neighborhood parks were even lower than that. So 20. So I think that sort of backs up what you're saying, is you don't see a lot of volume coming out of those cans. And the reason I mentioned the composition study and the volume is that we did calculate the avoided disposal cost of the material for the street side litter cans. It's 800 tons total per year of garbage that comes out of those cans. Just to relate that number, we collect about 60,000 tons per year in the curbside recycling program. So 800, did I say 800? I meant to say 800 tons a year out of the street side litter cans. So the benefits to recycling on the avoided cost side are also small. They're there, and they're small for this case now. I don't know the numbers for the other, for the other things, and they could have way more trash in that and be a higher percentage. But at least for the street side litter cans, the tonnage isn't a big driver.
Yeah.
On this, I'm sort of interested to ask Carrie, the toters are pretty big, and it may take a while to fill one up. I mean, do you have a collection schedule that kind of is tailored to that, or do you have a regular schedule and you just take whatever's there whenever you?
No, that's a good question. The toters we have are 30 gallon, and the way that the system evolved was, well, we tried to force a standardized collection on our folks, and it didn't work very well. So we went back and actually asked them what they thought would work best, and the answer was simple when you understood it, which was that all of our parks have somebody taking care of them. And if they're a large park, there's a person assigned that's there all the time. Other parks, smaller ones, neighborhood parks, are maintained by people on roving crews. What they suggested was just, when we get to the park, we'll check the container. When the container needs emptying, we'll report back to their district headquarters, the crew chief. And then what we have currently is a one small packer truck that basically does on-call picking up as part of its regular, in addition to its regular downtown route. Other places, the crews actually themselves will bring the full bags, because we line these containers with plastic bags, and they'll pull the liner out and take it back to district headquarters, and this stuff will be stored there until there's enough there to warrant a trip down to the processing. So we do it several different ways, and it's just tailored on what works with any given cruise or district. One other thing I wanted to say about the volume, and I guess cost effectiveness, is that the it's given the cost, and our major cost is, since our containers were free, other than we spent some money to retrofit the lids, but is collection costs, and it's not, because the volume isn't extremely high, it's not significant. We've just had our regular people, maintenance people, absorb that into their other work. But if you just look at cost effectiveness in terms of dollars, then I don't know how long. We've never done any kind of analysis to figure out when at some point it might become so. But in terms of the effectiveness of the program, there are things that you can't measure in dollars and cents, as I was saying earlier, and the public goodwill and continuing to create the recycling ethic from your inside your house to your yard to your park to your, when you get off your bus, is a value that is, you can't measure it, I don't think, in dollars and cents, but it's huge.
Well, you're singing my song. And I'm willing to hear if there's another, there's another verse here. One of the questions we had was, are we creating a consistent message, and should we have more uniform education efforts across the city? Or are we just, is this just an appropriate sort of, as Carrie said, extension of a recycling ethic that people have already adopted? Do we need additional education or outreach with these outside and curbside recycling efforts? Tim?
Well, my view is that if we were to proceed from pilot stage to permanent stage with street side recycling, we would want to have some type of education outreach. I think Carrie's anecdote is great. You talk to the sports coaches to pass the word around, and so whatever. That's not, there aren't the sports coaches out on the street, on the city streets, but there are other ways, and it may be that the market that's there listening and getting the message is a little bit different in each of these. We have the traveler in the case of the port. We have students and staff to some degree in the university, so slightly different, but the overall ethic that we're communicating is the same, and the specifics of the what we collect and exactly how we collect it might vary a little bit, but reiterating what doesn't go in the garbage would be a consistent thing. That coffee cup doesn't go in anybody's recycling. So that, I think those are the commonalities, but we'd have to kind of tailor how we send out the message for whatever the particular audience is. And for us, it's people by bus stops, workers walking by, or we'd have to, probably we should pay for paid advertising in real change or something like that.
I think your Husky and Seahawk games, that's obviously a case where if you do the recycling containers, sort of as people are heading out to their parking lots, you're going to need probably some specific messages with the game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The thing, building on what you just said, I think we, the city, can take a more proactive, kind of approach to letting people know that this is important to the city. Seattle Center, we had an opportunity to get a federal grant for some additional recycling containers, and that didn't work out. They said no the other day, but I gave them a call and said, hey, well, if we have any extra money, maybe we can find a way to do something together. But the idea is that, the city thinks it's an ethic, and, all the city departments might want to have a more consistent message, even though we're not always the same with the University of Washington or the port, that we can get together a little bit better on these things. And because that doesn't happen yet, in part because we've had different programs start at different times with a different emphasis and different audiences. But the last year or so, we've actually talked to each other. And to build upon that, yeah, isn't that amazing? So I think there's some goodwill, with some joint, ideas out there. And especially with there's a lot of public facilities that we own and operate. And if we can be consistent about that message, it's really helpful.
What about street fairs? Do they present an opportunity, or are people just coming in from everywhere and too hard to get a consistent message?
I know that University of Washington, not University, well, but the University Street Fair is looking at having some public place recycle pilot this year, and so that'll
Right.
hopefully, yeah. So we'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. So we've done some at some community festival events, like we had recycling at Centralia Community Festival last year, and we'll have it again. And looking at again trying to look at ways in which we can make it more accessible and make it more identifiable, so when people are there, they'll say, oh, this is a recycle can.
What about Seafair? You tried working with this, do the Seafair people recycle pretty well?
Actually, it's a requirement in the contracts and agreements with the city, and the parades, the neighborhood parades and the torchlight parade, there is virtually no recycling that I'm aware of. But at the races, when they're down in the that is required. They do have recycling centers set up, and they do pull a lot of stuff out. The same we require at the 4th of Julyvers in Myrtle Edwards, and also the other 4th of July, the major event at Gasworks. There's recycling there, and it's also part of their agreements. And they do. I've been down at Myrtle Edwards the last few years and noticed that there's a lot of material that comes out. So some of the neighborhood community festivals, as was just mentioned, Central Area, Magnolia, Wallingford, these, if they're in a park or in a park, then we can require, and when we permit, we do require recycling. And
Now, where do they get their containers, and do we supply them? Are they consistent design? It's up to them to figure that one out?
yeah, there are no, we don't have containers to provide them, and and there is no consistency that I know of. At Magnolia, for example, they use these, they've got these great big, very large cardboard boxes, like a refrigerator would come in, and they cut them off and kind of strap them together, and they
that I mentioned earlier, we're going to be unveiling and pushing very hard on, because you have to be careful. You have to watch out in a busy urban environment so that you keep yourself safe. We also have to educate drivers that they need to be on the lookout as well. We will look at 3rd and Pine, and as we see hot spots where this is occurring, we'll look at what we can do to sign better or provide better margin of safety.
We have a call now from Renton. Dave, you're on live with the mayor.
Yes, excuse me, Mayor Nichols. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
My pleasure as well.
Not too long ago last year, there was a bill that I testified on at the state legislature that unfortunately failed in committee, and I'm hoping it gets a fair shot at the city level. The bill number was House Bill 2068, and basically what it would have done in a custody case is it would have allowed a child to testify, because of the fact that in 1991, when my custody was being fought over, I was never allowed to testify, although I and many others had repeatedly said that I had wanted to do so, and I was never allowed to testify at all. And this bill would have said that what you can do is you can say that you do object to a child testifying, but it's not going to be up to you whether or not that happens. It would be up to the child and his or her guardian.
Let's get a response from the mayor.
That is not an issue that Seattle or your city, Renton, is going to get involved in. That's not part of the jurisdiction of cities in the state of Washington. That is exclusively the jurisdiction of the state legislature. So you're going to need to pursue that with your legislators and back in Olympia.
Down to southeast Seattle, Nick is on the line. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Mayor,
How are you?
I heard the fellow griping about Third Park Drive.
Yes.
I live on Lucille and Martin Luther King Way, and he should live here. It's a real mess.
It is, and it will be off and on a mess for the next several years. We're working as hard as we can to keep the dust and the noise and the disruption to a minimum, but we've got to ask for your patience. Every other week, I go out to a different point along the line and meet with the people who live there, the shopkeepers, the property owners, to make sure that the city and Sound Transit are doing everything we can to solve those problems. I'm taking a page out of the book of a former and late Seattle City Council member George Benson, who did that when the downtown tunnel was done. I hope when I'm out at MLK and Lucille that you will say hello, and if there are any problems, we'll work hard to fix them for you.
Up next to Michael in Lake City. You're on live with the mayor.
Hi, Mayor.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I think you're doing a fantastic job, and it's certainly going to vote for you.
Well, thank you.
I did last time, too. I've talked to you about this before.
Okay.
You probably didn't realize it, but we have a flooding problem here on the west side of Nathan Hale High School.
Okay.
Between 110th and 107th.
Okay. What is the street on the west side of Nathan Hale?
30th Northeast.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you're north and west? Where's the flooding?
Nathan Hale is between 107th and 110th.
On the west side, then?
On the west side, yes.
Okay.
And we've had some terrible flooding there. We haven't had much flooding this year.
Sure.
Because we haven't had that much hard rain.
Right.
But nevertheless, I have contacted your office,
Okay.
and I have contacted Seattle Public Utilities, and they did clear out some muck and rocks out of the
Okay.
creek, which did help. They had a hard time getting a permit because of Corps of Army Engineers.
Okay.
But we still need to have a permanent solution.
You're getting runoff from Thornton Creek, I would guess, during those storm events,
Yes,
which
sir.
runs right
Also
through your
from
neighborhood.
the culverts in front.
Yeah. One of the things that we've done in the last couple of years is we've increased our drainage fees, and we're trying to do a couple of things with those additional revenues. Dealing with spot flooding problems is one of them, as well as making sure that water as it goes through the natural drainage system and into the creeks is as clean as it can be and doesn't provide real pollution problems further down Thornton Creek. So we will take a look at the west side of Nathan Hale between 107th and 110th and see what those plans are and make sure that we're paying attention to that problem.
Back to the campus of the University of Washington, where we took our cameras earlier this week to find out what was on the minds of students over there. Here's what we learned. Roll that tape.
What are you doing to fight against the federal cuts against hunger and homelessness right now?
Mr. Mayor, it's really important to me that we support our youth in the Seattle area, and what are you doing to support young college students getting in there and helping out in our community centers?
Oh, I know a lot of students at the UW are concerned about safety in the U District. A lot of students live nearby campus, and can you tell us something that you're doing about safety here?
Safety is a big concern out there. They just had a young gentleman was shot to death in the U District just about a week or two ago.
Yes, we've been working with the university, Safeco, the U Bookstore, University Towers Hotel to provide additional policing, particularly along the Ave and then over a little bit east toward Greek Row, to make sure that...
In response to that?
Not so much in response to that as to public safety concerns over a long period of time. An individual incident, you can't really, you look for what the causes are, but that doesn't really necessarily tell you what underlying problems there are. Clearly, public safety has been an issue in the University District. Those entities that I just mentioned are helping to contribute to additional walking patrols, bicycle patrols. I've asked the City Council to approve additional police officers, some of which would be available to the North Precinct and for the University District. It's a very important issue. We want the young people in that area to feel absolutely safe. We want to make sure that that it's a neighborhood that people feel comfortable shopping and obviously going to school.
The young woman who wants more students and more youth to get involved in public service.
I think that's great. This past week I held my fourth youth town hall at the Seattle Center. And it was aimed at a little bit younger students, high school and indeed some middle school students, and you were our moderator. We want to get young people involved and engaged in the community at an early age because we think that that sets a pattern. Hopefully they find a passion for volunteering or perhaps even going into a career in public service. And you know, it worked for me, and I very much enjoy trying to encourage young people to do that.
Worked for you, meaning were you involved in an internship or in a youth
I was involved
service program?
in internship. I got involved in politics and local government, in civic affairs at a very young age, and it was a very empowering experience for me. We want to make sure that that's available to young people today as well.
The gentleman who talks about federal budget cuts, are you having to make a supplemental budget, in effect, a Plan B budget for what happens to the city if some of these federal cuts that have been proposed actually succeed?
Well, we're following them very closely, and we also are members of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities, and we follow it very closely through those organizations as well. Fortunately, the most draconian of the cuts that the Bush administration has proposed don't appear to be gaining traction either with Democrats or Republicans in Congress. The Community Development Block Grant has been a very important source for building community facilities as well as providing human services, and it appears Congress will probably fully fund that. There are federal housing programs and other programs that we're keeping a very close eye on.
But the hit is not too great at
this point. It isn't, and we're trying to encourage our members of the delegation to try and protect those human programs, human service programs.
And speaking of budget cuts, are you supportive of the plan being floated now to close 10 neighborhood schools in Seattle?
Well, CR, I've got some very significant concerns about the plan. One, it seems to me that the business of our schools is to provide our students with academic opportunities, academic success. And academic achievement was taken off the list of criteria for determining which schools would be closed. And I just don't think that's appropriate. We have to set the bar high for our kids, and then we have to help each and every student make it over that bar. That's the whole purpose and philosophy behind the Family and Education Levy that Seattle voters voted for last September. And we think that's got to be right in the midst of this conversation, and it's not.
If you did add it to the criteria and maybe the result would be 10 different schools that would end up getting the cut, would you still be supportive of the general idea that you got to reduce schools, or I guess the alternative is then to reduce teachers, one or the
I
other?
think that the choice that we need to look at is exactly that. Do we want to take the limited dollars that we have and put them into academic programs in the classroom, smaller class sizes, the other things that we know work in the classroom, or do we want to keep more buildings open? I think that's a pretty easy choice. I think we want to have quality in the classroom. If parents felt that having their child go to the neighborhood school ensured that they'd be in a great classroom with a great teacher, I don't think any of this conversation, this debate would be happening. People would be satisfied with that. But when you take academic achievement off the table as a criteria, what is the message you're sending about our goal as a city and as a school system?
It sounds like you're supportive of school closures if they're done under the right criteria.
I think that the school district has to live within its budget. I think that budget should be bigger, but that's not something that's controlled at the local level. And so I am supportive of them taking strong action. But it's got to be strong action toward an end. And to me, that end has to be academic achievement and excellence in our schools.
Mindy writes from the west slope of Queen Anne, and I think it's important to know exactly what the mayor sees for the future of Inner Bay. Does he want maritime industrial, or would he rather see it used for something like an office park?
Well, the zoning that we have out at Inner Bay, which is part of the Ballard Inner Bay Manufacturing and Industrial Center, it's industrial based. It does allow for some retail, it does allow for some office, but it is around the idea of job creation and industrial jobs. So that, I support that. I think that the maritime and manufacturing industries, which now provide about 120,000 family wage jobs in the city, are very important. We need to do what we can to protect them and to grow them, and that Inner Bay industrially zoned land is a big part of that. Now, if the port comes forward and says we have an opportunity to do something pretty special here in terms of creating jobs, I'm all for that. But the idea of rezoning it for housing or for big box retail, those I don't think are appropriate, and I don't think they're as valuable as having that land available for job creation.
And you mentioned the port. For those who don't know, this is really, it's a port decision in effect.
It's a port initiative to look at the underlying...
They own the land.
They own much of it, not all of it.
Yeah. The idea has been floated about a biotech hub. Would you be supportive of that? It seems like that would compete with your South Lake Union plan.
Well, no, I don't think so. Amgen, which is at Terminal 88, is a great addition. South Lake Union provides a place for the Fred Hutch, for the university, for Seattle Biomedical Research Institute, Merck, Corixa, some other companies. But having it...
I mean, is there enough demand for that much biotech?
Yeah, I think there could well be. But again, that would be an industrial research and development manufacturing function within the biotech sector. That would be fine. But I do want to see the areas that are closest to Pier 9091 be primarily for the maritime industries. That is a pretty valuable asset that we have.
It's back on the docket this week, strip clubs. The council approved yet another added one-year moratorium banning the addition of new strip clubs. I think they've done it for 17 years or something like that. At what point will the city deal with this more directly and in a straightforward way instead of just adding this?
We're dealing with it very directly. There are 4 of these businesses in our city. I haven't heard a whole lot of demand for more of these businesses to open up. So those people who want to participate and be customers for these businesses have a place to go. Those who want to have these businesses have opened them. I do not see this as being one of the biggest issues facing the city of Seattle. The moratorium, I think, has worked well, and we'll continue to study the issue, and when we think we've got an answer that protects neighborhoods from the kind of impact that these businesses can have, we'll propose that.
I guess the demand that's coming now is from an entrepreneur, business owner who wants to actually open one of these, and he's kind of up against this moratorium.
And I'm not real anxious to give him an opportunity to open another one in a Seattle neighborhood.
How much do you open the city, however, to a liability by not allowing him?
Well, again, what we're told is we have to provide some opportunity for these businesses. 4 of them exist under the current scheme, and that seems to be enough to provide for the various patrons. So again, I don't see a huge need for us to have an unlimited number of these sort of businesses in the city.
Couple more minutes. Josh from Capitol Hill writes, finally we're about to get a skate park at Lower Woodland. I'm very pleased about that, but why has it taken the mayor and the city so long to recognize this very important activity? The Parks Department should be taking a leadership role and not just sitting back and making the skateboarding community fight for every little inch.
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate the skateboard community for the fight that they did put up in Ballard. The Old Bull now is history, but there will be a permanent skate park feature in that new Ballard Park. And it would not have happened without the young people who came forward and made the case very effectively to me and to the City Council. Lower Woodland is another opportunity I became aware of, not in the too distant past. We've had some budget issues in the last couple of years that have prevented us from being able to invest in that. We're now moving forward with the planning, and we will have one in Lower Woodland. And I've asked the Parks Department to look at other opportunities in other parts of the city as well. I think it's a good activity. Clearly, it's something that we ought to provide for in our park system, along with all of the other wonderful activities people want to engage in.
Here's another item that's kind of making news just very recently. Clyde writes from Rainier Beach, I'm concerned about the new plan coming out of the City Council to install cameras at a handful of intersections in Seattle. Seems like it's more and more Big Brother.
Well, I haven't had a lot of time to be able to take a look at what the council has put forward. They just adopted an appropriation on Monday of this week to do this. I want to take a hard look at it. I also want to make sure that the particular funds they used are appropriate. So I will certainly keep in consideration Clyde's concerns.
And this is, for those who don't know, we just have to close on this, this is to stop, or I guess to track red light violators.
That's right. It's a way to get a picture of a license plate number when somebody runs a red light.
And we haven't done that yet in the city of Seattle.
Seattle has not done that.
Thank you for being here.
It's been my pleasure.
See you next month, and we thank you all for watching and those who participated by email and by phone. And if you want to be a part of next month's program, you can email us and we will use your question on the air. Our email address is at seattlechannel.org. And that's it for us today. We wrap it here on behalf of our talented studio crew. I'm C.R. Douglas. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.